Welcome into the channel, everyone. Hey, my name is Kyle Yates. Today we're taking a look at my top 32 players heading into NFL free agency. Let's get to it. Welcome in. Hey, my name is Kyle Yates. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to check out today's video. Make sure to like, subscribe to the channel, click that bell to get notified for when new content drops. We're taking a look here at my top 32 skill position players heading into free agency and what this means for fantasy football. I'll take a look at some predictions here, taking a look at the latest news and rumors as we are right on the cusp of the NFL Combine kicking off. But when the NFL Combine kicks off, that means that the free agency sort of wheel is spinning here. So there's a lot to break down. We'll get to all of it here. My top 32 players going from 32 down to 1. All right, not much to break down here with these later on, guys, so I'm just going to kind of fly through these. Mitch Trubisky is number 32 here. I think as we've seen recent track history for guys like Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, these guys who have gotten chances in the past, but then have kind of fallen into backup roles or have become journeymen. Mitch Trubisky is an interesting name to keep an eye on here. I think that he's done enough in the relief of Josh Allen that we've seen in years past, learning underneath someone like Josh Allen, where we could see, I think he's at least worthy of being in a 50-50 competition or battle going into free agency. Someone, if the Raiders move on from Geno Smith in free agency, or they release him and then they're going to draft Fernando Mendoza, do they go with Mitch Trubisky as kind of that bridge guy? I think he's going to head elsewhere other than Buffalo this year, so that'll be an interesting name to kind of keep an eye on. Calvin Austin at 31, wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, delivered 2 game-winning touchdowns for Pittsburgh this season, so a big play threat, can win deep downfield with quickness and shiftiness. So he's someone to keep an eye on here, but not anything more than a wide receiver 3 for an NFL offense. But for fantasy purposes, if he lands in a much more high-powered offense, that could mean that he is into the flex conversation where he really hasn't been in Pittsburgh because of the state of the offense. Darren Waller, tight end for the Miami Dolphins, comes back out of retirement here. And then there was that, how many games was it? 4-game stretch or whatever it was, where Darren Waller just absolutely feasted red zone dominance, right? It's 6 touchdowns on only 24 receptions this year. So he can still be a rotational player, not necessarily someone that I think is going to be fantasy relevant week in, week out throughout the course of 2026 if he does decide to come back and play. So a name to keep an eye on there as a potential rotational piece for an NFL offense. Rachaad White, running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading into free agency. He's had, before this past year where he had 40 receptions, 3 straight years with 50 receptions. So as a pass catching running back, as a third down guy, I think that he still fills a very, very valuable role, kind of like a Gio Bernard in years past and what he was for the Cincinnati Bengals. He will find a home here as a rotational guy, but he's not going to be a workhorse back suddenly given the keys to a backfield. Marcus Mariota at number 28, quarterback for the Washington Commanders. Averaged 48.5 rushing yards per start in 2025 when he was filling in for Jaden Daniels. So still providing a high floor from a fantasy standpoint. The upside probably isn't there at 34 years old off the top of my head. So I think that he stays in Washington, or he's going to move around, maybe to be the backup in Buffalo if Mitch Trubisky moves on. But a backup quarterback, I don't see him getting necessarily a shot at a starting role here soon. David Njoku, or let me just really clarify, unless the seats have completely emptied and there is a team like the Arizona Cardinals that is like, we have to have someone, then I could see Marcus Mariota getting that job. Okay, then David Njoku here at, where are we at? 27, tight end for the Cleveland Browns. I think this is really Atlanta or bust for David Njoku following Kevin Stefanski to be a complimentary tight end to Kyle Pitts. Still just kind of a red zone guy. I don't think that he's going to be a tight end 1 for an NFL offense at this stage of his career, but can still have value for an NFL offense. Charlie Kolar, the tight end for the Baltimore Ravens, has been someone that's been a blocking tight end. I don't see him really moving into more of a clear, full tight end 1 role for an NFL offense. I think he's going to be kind of that blocking tight end. So not someone that I'm really keeping a close eye on from fantasy purposes, but that could change if we get word that, because he is a solid receiver, but it's just not his game. It's not his strong suit, and he hasn't been asked to do it there in Baltimore with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Jalen Nailor, wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings here at 25. Deep threat for Minnesota this past year. Took a couple years of his career to really get going, but averaged 15.3 yards per receptions this past year, and that is in just a horrific situation that we all know about. So I think that he's going to get paid a little bit more than what we could expect. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 for an NFL offense. He's shown enough to be given that. So an interesting name to keep an eye on as we move into free agency. The landing spot could be really interesting for Jalen Nailor. All right, then at 24, it's Deebo Samuel, wide receiver for the Washington Commanders, previously of the San Francisco 49ers. Recorded 72 catches this past year. That's the highest since his 2021 All-Pro campaign. So I'm keeping an eye on Deebo Samuel, not necessarily to get a substantial contract in free agency, but one to be a 1 to 2 year kind of deal where he could move from a high-end wide receiver 2 for an NFL offense to a really, really solid wide receiver 3 as he nears the latter years of his NFL career. But I think that could still have value if he moves into primarily a slot receiver role for an NFL offense. We'll kind of keep an eye on that as we move forward. But Deebo, I'm not completely writing off just yet from a fantasy standpoint. Then we go to J.K. Dobbins, 23, and led the Broncos in rushing with 772 yards in just 10 games. But the injury history is really starting to pile up here. So I think that we're going to see Dobbins move into a backup running back role. I would actually be very surprised if Denver re-signed him. I've got another running back here that we'll talk about moving to Denver. So Dobbins, I think, is going to be like an interesting spot to keep an eye on would be Atlanta. To be, if Tyler Allgeier does move on in free agency, then we could see Dobbins move into the backup role alongside Bijan Robinson, potentially as the red zone option there to be complementary to Bijan Robinson. So that's something to keep an eye on there. J.K. Dobbins to Atlanta would be an interesting landing spot. Then just talked about Tyler Allgeier here at 22. I think Allgeier is going to get paid a little bit more than what we expect. I think he's going to be given an opportunity to be a lead option in a backfield. And so we just talked about J.K. Dobbins going from Denver to Atlanta. We'll switch it. Let's go Tyler Allgeier to Denver. I think is one that I'm really intrigued by. Landing spot there to be alongside R.J. Harvey. And Allgeier showed really good things early on in his career, and then you get Bijan coming to town, and so he's buried on the depth chart, moves into this red zone role and kind of just a short yardage guy, but he's so much more than that. So ranking top 5 in the NFL in yards after contact per carry this past year, I'm really excited to see him get an opportunity to be a lead option in a backfield elsewhere. Then Rico Dowdle came out of nowhere here this past year, handling 185 total touches this past year. He's going to be an interesting name because I think that he is worthy of getting a starting role. We saw that sort of move back to Chuba Hubbard at the end of the year in Carolina, but Rico Dowdle, based on what he showed us and the dominant stretch that he had, where he was just a fantasy football superstar this past year, I think that he's going to get a chance to be a lead option in a backfield. As to where exactly that is, I'm not quite sure. I'm having a hard time pinpointing exactly where that could be, but Rico Dowdle, a name to watch for sure. Then we go into, at 20, Aaron Rodgers. If Pittsburgh doesn't want him with Mike McCarthy, then it's really hard for me to see where exactly he goes. If he continues playing, I could see this being a very long, drawn-out kind of thing where maybe he doesn't retire right away, but at the beginning of the season is kind of just hanging out there, and then a team suffers an injury at the quarterback position, and he goes and plays there. Or it's Minnesota, right? If Minnesota can't get one of these premier quarterback free agents to pair alongside JJ McCarthy, then maybe they just go with Aaron Rodgers, complete the Brett Favre career narrative there. Kenneth Gainwell at number 19 overall, producing his first 1,000-yard scrimmage season. I did not see that coming here in Pittsburgh. Thought that Jalen Warren was going to for sure have that role locked up. And then Kenneth Gainwell comes in and performs really, really well. So he's a player that is a third down guy, a receiving option, but performed very, very well in that role. So looking at some places there, maybe that really need that sort of complementary piece like Baltimore, right, alongside Derrick Henry. If you want to move on from Justice Hill, Kenneth Gainwell, a name to watch there in Baltimore. Chig Okonkwo, this is his third consecutive season of 50-plus receptions. I was kind of shocked to find that out. He's got the playmaking ability after the catch, so he could be an intriguing name for an offense that needs a pure receiving tight end, but just he really hasn't had consistent quarterback play in Tennessee. The offensive ecosystem there, the coaching ecosystem, everything has been kind of working against him. So I'm intrigued to see where Okonkwo goes this offseason. Then Travis Kelce, it's Kansas City or retirement. Jauan Jennings, we saw really good things from him in San Francisco this past year. 55 catches, 9 touchdowns. Injury history is certainly there to worry about, but could see him getting a little bit more money than we anticipate. I think San Francisco would be very wise to bring him back, though, especially if they are going to move on from Brandon Ayuk like we expect them to. Dallas Goedert here for me at 15 overall, which is a little bit higher than what I've seen from other analysts. Dallas Goedert, I think, still has plenty in the tank, and 11 receiving touchdowns this past year. Can still be a red zone threat for an offense as a tight end 1. I think Dallas Goedert's still got more to offer. I don't see him getting a 3 to 4 year deal, but maybe in that 2 year to an ascending offense. And I want to see him with a different quarterback other than Jalen Hurts. I think that could unlock a little bit more for Dallas Goedert. Then at 14, we go Romeo Doubs. Led all Packers pass catchers and red zone targets with 18 this season. As an X receiver, fills a valuable role for an offense. Like, can we get Romeo Doubs to Buffalo to fill that X receiver role? That would be fantastic. There are a lot of teams that need this player that can play on the outside, can be reliable when targeted, but he just hasn't had the fantasy upside because of how crowded that offense has been. So Romeo Doubs, a player that I think is going to get a larger payday than what we anticipate, a player that I'm really, really interested to see where he lands. I've got him in a couple of dynasty leagues. I'm interested to see where he lands. Isaiah Likely, all the way up at 13. We've seen flashes, right? We've seen what you can do when Mark Andrews is injured or isn't playing super well. And so Isaiah Likely as a tight end 1 for an offense, I think could go nuclear this next year. He's a player that I'm really, really excited to see where he lands. Wan'Dale Robinson at 12 made himself some money this past year, setting a Giants franchise record for slot receptions with 88 catches, 140 targets. Really unlocked with Jackson Dart there as the quarterback when Dart was healthy. He's a slot player that has, that's going to hold his contract back. But if you can get him to a place where that slot role is very, very valuable and he can be peppered with targets, we could see just what he did here this past year continuing. So he's a player I talked about in my Dynasty wide receiver rankings episode where it's like I could see his value jumping up the board significantly if we get a good landing spot here. Another player, really, really keep a close eye on. Cade Otton, all the way up at 11. I'm a Cade Otton fan. I had him at tight end 2 in that draft class behind Kyle Pitts. He was not Kyle Pitts, certainly, but he was a very, very well-rounded tight end that was just going to soak up everything that was thrown at him within that 5 to 10 to 15-yard range of the field. And we've seen that he's been incredibly durable, leading the tight end position in offensive snaps with 993 this past year. He's not back in Tampa Bay. I think that's a miss on Tampa Bay's part. He's just an incredibly solid tight end that just chain mover, leave him out there for every single snap. He's not going to be a liability in the run game. Can actually give you a boost in the run game. Then we go into this top 10, and this is where really interesting names kind of start to form. Travis Etienne has had an up and down roller coaster career, obviously. You get some Urban Meyer time in there, and things really fall off. But the versatility shows, right? His big play threat, his receiving ability, even though he's not super natural at it, he can thrive in it. And so Etienne, I think, is going to wind up being the top running back to hit the market. I think that he is going to hit the market. I don't think Jacksonville's going to franchise tag him. So he could be that player that Kansas City sort of zeroes in on and says, we need to upgrade the running back position. We need to get more explosive. Travis Etienne, come on down. We'll hand you a nice contract here. 27 years old, a little bit older than what I thought he was. So that's something to just keep an eye on and monitor from a dynasty standpoint and to know. But a player that could absolutely wind up being that Kansas City Chiefs target here in free agency. Then Mike Evans. Listen, the 1,000-yard streak is done. Due to injury, you're going to have to deal with some hamstring injuries every single year, but 100-plus touchdowns can still be a red zone monster for you, can still go downfield and make some incredible contested catches. So he's a player that, like, you're going to limit his snaps. He's not going to be someone who is playing, 90% of the offensive snaps every single year. You need that down towards like 60% to kind of deal with some durability, but can help push a contender over the top. So Buffalo makes a ton of sense for me for Mike Evans. If he does indeed leave Tampa Bay, I would keep a close eye on that one. Rashid Shaheed, leading the NFL in yards per return in 2025. He gets traded from New Orleans to Seattle, and it is a big part of why they were able to win the Super Bowl, why they were able to bring the Super Bowl to Seattle. So for Shaheed, I think it depends on what he wants to do, right? Does he want to make as much money as he possibly can, or does he want to potentially take a little bit less, stay in Seattle, and push for championships every single year? That'll be something to monitor. A prediction that I had in the Substack article, which you can find over here in the description, was, and it's completely free, by the way, Shaheed to Las Vegas, right? If you're going to bring in Fernando Mendoza, you need to upgrade pretty much every position on this offense. Shaheed to be that vertical option to open things up underneath makes a ton of sense for me. Then we go into some players that I think they're either going to be franchise tagged, they will be franchise tagged by the time that you're watching this, or they're going to get long-term contract extensions. I don't really see, other than one, I don't see many of these players hitting the free agent market. Kyle Pitts will be franchise tagged by the Atlanta Falcons. That news just dropped yesterday. It's disappointing. Would have loved to see him go elsewhere, but we still know that, I mean, he was the tight end too this past year in Atlanta, and we still know what he can do there as he's fully healthy. Breece Hall, news just dropped right before I started recording that he will be franchise tagged by, or transition tagged by the New York Jets. He's not going anywhere, which is super disappointing. Would have loved to see him hit the open market, but still just 24 years old. Daniel Jones, quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, with a career revitalization for him. He's not playing anywhere else. He's not taking that chance. And for Indianapolis, they've spent how long with the quarterback carousel? You're not letting him go, even though he does have the injury there. Daniel Jones will be in Indianapolis. Alec Pierce, this is one where if they can't work out the extension, then I think they let Michael Pittman Jr. walk and release him with a minimal dead cap, frees up a ton of cap space that then they can use to sign Alec Pierce. And I think that Pierce's role is more valuable and more of a unicorn than what Pittman's bringing at this point. And you can fill Michael Pittman Jr.'s role as an X receiver a little bit easier. That then creates an intriguing situation for Pittman on the free agent market where he could be very, very highly coveted and put up towards the top of this wide receiver free agent class. He's still a very good wide receiver, dealing with back injuries and all this sort of stuff, has still fought through it and is still a very good wide receiver. So Alec Pierce, I do expect to be in Indianapolis. Then we go Kenneth Walker, 139 scrimmage yards per game during the postseason. When Zach Charbonnet was out, we saw what Kenneth Walker can do, and he's going to parlay that into a massive payday. As to where exactly that is, I don't know. I don't think that he leaves Seattle due to the Zach Charbonnet injury. That'll be sort of an interesting thing to watch. Does now Charbonnet hit the free agent market next year when it looked like he was going to be the lead option in this backfield with Walker hitting free agency? We'll see how that plays out, but I think Walker, seeing what just happened, how dominant this team was, knowing that they can just run it back and make a push for another Super Bowl next year, I think he stays. Malik Willis, quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, is number 2 here on the list for me. Finishing 2025 with a career-high 104.2 passer rating in the appearances that he made when Jordan Love was injured. He has made significant progress as a passer, and we knew what he could do as a runner. That was obvious coming out of Liberty, but the passing needed significant work. Falls in the NFL draft dramatically, and then it gets traded to Green Bay and has just made significant strides there. It's a small sample size. There's a risk. He's not going to get a 4-year, a $200+ million contract. I think it's going to be a 2-year deal where we see, maybe the guaranteed money runs out after year 1 or whatever for him to get the starting role somewhere. He will be a starting quarterback next year. It's just a matter of where. So if you've held on to Malik Willis in Dynasty all this time, congratulations. Number 1 is George Pickens. Dominant year, 93 catches, 1,429 yards, 9 touchdowns. Getting the franchise tag placed on him, though. The concerning part here for George Pickens is that he's not going to respond well to being having the franchise tag placed on him, and Dallas already pays a ridiculous amount of money to CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. So this is the conversation with Cincinnati, right? Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Do you want to do that again? And I just don't see that happening for Dallas. So there is a chance that George Pickens gets tagged and traded this offseason. There's risk. And the talent level is there, but he's going to hold out if he has the franchise tag placed on him, and this could turn south really quick and could ultimately result in a trade away. So from a dynasty standpoint, if you can get out and you can get a haul for him, I think I would entertain it. We can talk about that in the YouTube comments here, though. Make sure to let me know what you would trade away George Pickens for, what it would have to be to move off of him, or if you even are. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Top 32 NFL free agents. We're going to hit free agency here very soon. We'll get some updated news. Make sure that you guys are subscribing to the Substack, keeping you up to date there with all the information that you need to know. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell to get notified for when new content drops. I'll talk to you again soon.